How to navigate the financial reset, how to make sense of an ever-changing world, and how to find a sense of certainty when society is full of uncertainty. These are some of the common threads and talking points that we'll be bringing to you on our brand new weekly segment here on the Elevate podcast with my co-host, Sam X. Now, Sam is the host of our Navigating Digital Assets course, where he's helped hundreds of participants to understand the good, the bad, and the ugly of this new world of digital assets. Everything from blockchain to cryptocurrency to NFTs and more. And we want to now expand the conversation to look at the wider picture of the financial reset. So we're launching this brand new segment on the Elevate podcast. Plus, we're bringing you a group education program specifically looking at how we can navigate the financial reset. We are in the early stages of development, but if you'd like to find out more, please visit weareelevate.org/financial reset, and you'll be the first to learn about our brand new program within the Elevate community. In this episode, today is our first pilot conversation. We got together to plan the nature of this podcast and what we'd be covering. And we got straight into such a powerful conversation that we said, why don't we just hit record, see what happens? An hour later, there we were. We had our pilot episode of this brand new segment in hand. We don't have a title for this segment yet, so please let us know in the comments what you think we should call this particular segment. This episode of the podcast represents the first of many weekly conversations with Sam, helping you to navigate this world of the financial reset. So I hope you enjoy what we have for you today. Today, we look at how we can become empowered in these changing times. And it's the first, I hope, of many powerful conversations. Let us know what you think. Give us your feedback in the comments, and I'll see you very soon once again on the Elevate podcast. Now, remember, please do head to weareelevate.org/financial reset if you're interested in finding out more about being part of our group program, where we will be at the pioneering edge of the financial reset to help you understand how we can take full advantage of the changing world around us so we don't get caught in the headlights, but we get ahead of the game and understand how we can build a sovereign future. Thanks again for tuning in. My name is Astin-Gregory. This is the Elevate podcast. But I've been listening to this audio track when I'm in the gym, and one of it's like, it's music combined with kind of like motivational clips, like from speeches. And there was just this line in there that was, remember why you got started.
Yeah.
And it took me right back to 2012 when I quit my corporate career just to start something of my own. And that was the first thing I really came face to face with. First, it was my own fears.
Yeah.
That limiting thoughts, self-doubts. And, I spent a lot of time confronting that. But that message to me in the gym was just like, that's where we're at now. It's that place of fear.
Yeah,
we need to move from fear into enablement and action and empowerment. And
totally. And you haven't got all these cheesy lines, but they're so true. You haven't got to know the whole journey. You just got to take the next step. And it's almost people are really stressed by that idea. I've got to know the path I've got to go. You haven't. You've got to. But by moving forward, you're always getting more data. You're always evolving, and they're always takes you to the next step. And even if it's a decision down the road that you're actually going to step off again.
Yes.
But being paralysis, you're trying to choose the right way and what's work. You've got to keep moving. And just really the sovereign aspect, I think, and the message can soothe people. It's personal to you. It's what resonates to you, and you pivot based on your experiences through it.
Yes.
But like I said, the most powerful control aspect is the paralysis and the fear. And that's universal, at every angle. So moving beyond that changes everything.
Well, it is. Even planning my workout regime for this week, my intellectual mind started to kind of work out what's the optimal routine.
Yes.
And that's there is an element of that. But
yeah,
I was trying to imagine what it would be like having done it. It's like, well, the only way you can do that is to do it. So whether I do a run after leg day or I do HIIT after a leg day, like test it. Like don't analyze it. That again, it's like fear. What if I get it wrong? Like what if I cause an injury?
Yeah.
It's even in a different context. It shows how fear plays out. And it can paralyze us, put us in paralysis by analysis. Some taking action.
Interesting. Even if it's almost like I had this thought the other day, if we had the answer and we somehow knew the answer and it was true, that would be rather boring.
Oh,
in a sense, even if it's like, you know, it's almost like part of my excitement of the uncertainty of, you know, talk about even my crypto portfolio, like I want to build the ultimate. Doesn't exist. I know that, but I'm still tinkering. But part of the interest and the challenge is I don't know what the future is, and I don't know exactly how it's going to play. If I did, and it was so, which is, you know, hypothetical because that doesn't exist, but that would make life very boring. Where would be the journey?
where's
So the
the juice
journey
in that?
is, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Where is the so there has to be a little bit of that's, I think that's the journey where we live, is there is jeopardy and stress, but that's what makes you alive, you know.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, and embracing that, you know, that fear and uncertainty and the excitement and everything, and I would like to bring it together, living it as one rather than swinging from the two sides, which is really excited, really terrified, both, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've got some fear, as you know. Often when you're doing really exciting things or moving forward, there's a bit of fear, isn't there? Like, you're doing good stuff on your journey through positive. Often we're at the cutting edge, like high class athletes. Some of the nerves and the fear is really important.
Yes.
You know, to get you to
Yes, I think it's like a pre-warning for what's coming. And yeah, again, it's all the way through my life, it's been one of those things. It's like the reward is at the end of the struggle, you know.
Yeah.
So whether it's working out or working on a new project, taking on a new set of knowledge or skills, like the frustration and the struggle is part of the process, is part of the learning curve, and it's part. And when you start to learn to love the struggle, not in a like get addicted to the struggle kind of thing, but just learn to
understand that it's part of the process. Yeah, and you're absolutely right that, you know, talk about the kind of, you know, I know that when I look back in my life, the things that I really wanted, that my intention was clear on, I achieved because I was so clear my intention. The road to getting there was never how you thought it would be. So again, trying to think, I've got clear intention, it's going to play out. Often it plays out in a completely different way, but in hindsight, you look at it in, you know, in the future and look back and go, oh my God, I did get there. It wasn't, and you could never predict it. That's kind of like the mystery of the universe or whatever, how it leads you there and higher self is guiding you. But that's what's really interesting. You know, it's not a boring, okay, straight line road ever. And, you know, absolutely, that is that duality of, you know, you appreciate the fruits from the challenges that forge you to get there. And this, you know, as we've discussed, this, I don't view this last 3 years as anything's gone wrong. This is forging us and actually challenging us to do what we always wanted to do. So all of it's forcing us to improve. So there is a huge gift in it, you know. So it's got both sides to it. Yeah, it's tough and struggle and there's dark stuff going on, but actually it's forging us in the fire to do better things, you know.
I agree. Yeah, that piece around knowing the whole path is an interesting one. I was at a talk in Bristol, maybe 2 or 3, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, maybe 5 years ago. Yeah, more likely 5 years ago. But it was someone who'd climbed Everest multiple times. Crazy. once been what is enough. But they talked about how they had the route planned, the primary route, based upon existing knowledge of current hazards and, you know, optimal time scales and likely weather, etc. But they also had like route 2, route 3, backup routes. But he was very clear in saying that, you know, these are our intended routes.
Yeah.
And almost every time he's gone up Everest, it's ended up being none of those routes. You know, it's you've got to adapt to the circumstances as they.
Yeah, totally. And I think people are looking for, understandably, the fear means you want a safe way or an answer, and actually, you know, people are able to adapt and shift whatever. Have always been able to navigate. Again, it always comes out the word we keep using, navigate, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's not like give me the way. It's a journey. You've got to be ready to pivot and ready to change and ready to change your ideas and learn stuff and keep moving forward. Yeah, because you won't know. It's like the old thing of being stuck on the edge of a swimming pool. You know, the toes are on the edge. You can't get those answers until you dive in and move it. You know, you want to almost know before you go, well, you can't. You've got to go to know, right? You know, it's always that paradox. You've got to keep moving to get the data to then be able to shift and that journey. So it is, you know, feeling the fear and doing it anyway, and you know, and knowing you're not stuck on any path you begin. You know, like I know a lot of the successful people I've spoken to, they were all about making mistakes, and the big thing is moving on quickly from it.
Yes.
You know, not trying to avoid making mistakes. The mistakes are all part of the rich learning, you know. Same as what crypto, I talked to a lot of people this weekend. the real people done well, they've lived their mistakes and they felt them, and they're the ones they've learned it. And rather than go, I understand some people, it's a big mistake, they want to throw it away, go out. But the ones who've gone, hang on, I've learned that, and now I'm stronger for it, and I'm going to succeed because of my mistakes. And almost the people who do really well by accident in kind of investing often lose all that money, because they got lucky, but they haven't learned the kind of skills or the mindset or the emotions. So, those early mistakes for me that were really painful at the time, I look back, and of course at the time doesn't mean, like you said earlier, doesn't mean when you're going through it, even though psychologically it's a gift, you're still feeling awful and resisting it. But in hindsight, it's so clear what a gift it was.
Well, it's the pain of the hard knock that gets you to learn the lesson. I mean, if you've just lived through a comfortable path and you don't know where, it could be luck, it could, or a variety of factors. But once you hit the edges, it helps you understand how to course correct in the future.
Yeah.
And without that, you're not really all in, I feel. And,
no, it's almost come too easy. You got lucky, which is why people who do, get really lucky on an early, what they call sometimes the shit coin, they got in and they did happen to get in early, and they did their 1000x. And most of those people will lose that money. Somehow they can get to be a millionaire and lose it because they've not had those hard lessons. And the lessons that do, talking financial investing, the lessons that work the most are the ones that do cost you money.
Yes.
Because you do feel those, and you don't want to repeat them. So
yeah, I've been in the startup world for about 10 years. Well, 10 years now, yeah. And the old adage of fail forward.
Yeah.
Is it's fail fast, fail forward. Take action, learn from the act, because otherwise you end up intellectualizing exactly what we've just been talking about, trying to predict the path to the top of Everest.
Totally.
When there's so many variables along the way, and ultimately it's our own fear. But you're right, we do understand that we want a safe path. We want to minimize our risk.
Yeah.
Same in crypto. Like you don't. You want a calculated bet.
Yeah, totally.
It's not. Even using the term. Bet again. The bet is a kind of. It's a startup word. Making small bets. Taking small actions to assess. The response to that action, is it effective? And I think, I see comparables in the crypto space for sure.
Yeah, and controlling your emotions.
Yes.
Like it's almost like there's a great summary that almost the market cycles have been the same since markets existed, say the stock market in the 20s. A lot of these trading analysis patterns that play out, they are because the big money have always understood human emotion.
Yeah.
And these really complex trading cycles, there's something called the Wyckoff method, very complex, and when it takes years to understand, but it really clicked with me. What that really is the big money endlessly understanding human psychology and rinsing, repeating, pushing the emotions of the smaller money to basically, they're the house to make them win. Yes. So it's human. What they're understanding is human behavior, human emotion. Yeah. So the people who are able to, they've got a bit of enough hands, they've got a lot of money, and they're able to move the market, but equally, they're not actually seeing, they're just playing on your emotion endlessly. So can you, big part of being empowered, it's almost like anything, can you remove yourself from the manipulation and your emotion being pulled around, which we could talk about that in the investment markets, but of course we could extrapolate that to the wider world. That's what the media are doing. Yes. Pulling you and manipulating you, not by forcing you, but by corralling you via your emotions. Yes. So again, like scaring you into selling at the wrong time, forcing you in, or tempting you into buy at the wrong time. And it's so clever because they create patterns. As soon as somebody thinks they understood the pattern, they see an emotion, then they'll just change it enough so they fall. So, it's fascinating. And I think the learning again gets you beyond that. Yeah. Because people think, well, it's rigged, so therefore, what's the point? It's all fixed. It isn't completely rigged. Yeah. It's the fact that you need to get educated and you need to have self-control and self-discipline. And so I always give the example, people sometimes get negative, go, it's so much power. It's still based on you not understanding, not being educated and being a victim of your emotions. So you do have the ability through education and empowerment and getting clear of succeeding. It's not a rigged, that's what I always want to do. It's not completely rigged. It relies on you not understanding what's going on and being pulled around and being led by your fear or your greed, but that doesn't mean that it's you can't do well if you understand that. And people who've understood what's going on have always done well. And when I talk about financial resets, it's not a complete, robbing people. There's a lot of that goes on, let's be honest, but at a large level, it's about people understanding the game, or the system, or even understanding money, which is why educating about money is so important. People who've understood money don't often suffer in financial resets just because they understand money. Yes. So it's relying on you not understanding. That's why, again, education is fundamental to.
Yeah, my first podcast was called the Unstoppable Podcast. I released it in 2015, and really it was my to share the kind of lessons I was learning during my early stages into entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
I did a lot of work kind of studying the behaviors, patterns, belief systems, habits of the kind of high achievers, and those that were financially prosperous. And it's exactly what you've just said. They understand, they go about learning the rules of the game in order to optimize their own moves in the game.
Totally.
That is learnable. That was
totally, which is why that classic example of a lottery winner who's never had any money will generally, win, given 10 million in the Euro Millions. Generally, what happens is they'll go back to where they were.
Yep.
That's generally the rule, because they're not used to having that money, and they're not, they don't have the relationship. So often it's not just that people born into a lot of money have a leg up. Often that happens as well, but generally it's more that they're used to having that lot of money. They're used to relating to it in a different way. So that's why Robert Kiyosaki's book, I think we discussed, a few months ago, is so good, because it just discusses those two, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the conditioning, around money transforms how you relate to it. And, so absolutely being educated about it, or being your relationship with it. How was it when you're young, and how do you transform that? That's the process I'm trying to go through with, myself, my family, because it starts with you, it starts with you, like everything.
Yeah, it's mindset. The point you were saying about the game being rigged, the reality is our beliefs become our reality. And if you believe the game is rigged, you'll act in accordance with that belief.
Totally. Totally.
You act in accordance with that belief enough times, it becomes your identity. And therefore you just essentially forego any sense of agency or autonomy that you ever had.
It's the victim mentality again. Exactly. So that's why it's interesting. It's this paradox of, as I explained in the training, there is a huge amount of manipulation, no question. But it doesn't mean that it's a completely rigged game. It's based on you, being fooled or being tricked. But that's on you. I'm not defending the trickery. I'm not defending the intentions behind the trickery, because it's not honest. But I think if we're really real and get to the core of it, the only way out of that trickery is you to learn not to be tricked.
Yes.
You're not going to. It's like the idea: are we going to stop the tricksters being tricksters? Is there a world where that exists where there aren't tricksters? Actually, your way out of that is not destroying every trickster and saying they can't exist. That's their free will, even though they've chosen a dark path. What's my way so that I'm not a victim of that? And that's where, again, it's the empowerment coming from you. Yes. rather than saying let's stop all, let's clear the world of any trickster dishonesty, or hang on, how can I navigate so that I'm not a victim of it?
Yes, and that mentality as well. I think we've talked about it before. When you start trying to think about how do we eliminate the word of tricksters, you end up becoming the trickster in order to, in order to, tactically maneuver around the tricksters.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And again,
to try and circumnavigate their tricks.
Yeah,
your character bleeds into theirs.
Yeah, and I think it's something came to me in the first year of the lockdown where I thought it's the trickster and the kind of tyranny has always been there, but it's really obvious now, and it was obvious to a lot more people who weren't aware of it. That's why a lot of people obviously become aware since 2020 onwards. But the gift in it, in a way, particularly in the lockdown period where we couldn't travel, it did force a lot of people much more into the present.
Yeah.
And it was a much more visceral experience living through that. And that was tough because it was different. And it kind of took people out of their perceived comfort. But what really struck me was actually it was much more real and kind of, alive feeling, because it's like the reality is, think about the animal kingdom, the world is full of threats. There are, predators, and there are, that's all going on. And that's where they're very present, which is, yes, they're completely still and calm, and they're ready and vigilant. And it's almost, that's perhaps more a real, I'm going off on tangent as always, but that's kind of perhaps a more real state of being alive as a human, that absolutely life isn't certain. There are threats, and there are predators, and there is light and dark. So actually, you don't have that certainty. Doesn't mean you have to be in fear all the time, but you can be present and relaxed, and also aware that yes, you need to be, like for the tricksters, you need to be on your guard. Doesn't mean you're like, oh my god, it's a whole world, it's full of everything, but you know, that is again that middle line of, you know, I think the kind of sort of peaceful warrior, the ultimate one, is like, you know, absolutely at peace and ready, you know, to defend or fight, or you know, or so again, it's that, it's bringing those two things together, you know, rather than swinging from it's all terrifying and we're after us, or it's all good and you know it's all cool. It's both, you know, when you walk that line, you know, of the peaceful warrior.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of analogies from the martial arts world. Excuse me. It's not a oh dear, it's not a practice I've had a lot of experience in, but we've got this intuition that our boy Zach is going to be into martial arts.
Right.
It's just something about him, you know. He's just very, he's very agile, but also he energized, but then he has a calming element to him as well. But
yeah, and what at the core of martial arts, what is it? It's bringing you, you know, a lot of us, you know, years ago, a big pivot for me was reading The Power of Now. You know, I've got, you know, like, and it was a step on my journey. And again, that now state is where you're much more alive. You know, you're ready to react, but you're there present. And interesting, you talked about like the climbing Everest. You know, me, I come from a, you know, my thing was I spent 23 years in the Alps. I loved big mountain skiing. You know, and a big part of extreme sports is having that risk and jeopardy because it forces you into the now, right? Because you know, when I was skiing really steep couloirs in the Alps, where it's, you know, fall you die territory, right? Terrifying, but what that does, why it gives people such a high and a buzz, and of course very addictive. And in my young days, I was addicted to that hit, and you need more and more of it. Is that really all my mind chatter had to be right there. Every cell of my body was in that couloir making a turn, and it forced me into the present. That's why you feel so good. Yes. Because you can't go on the mind negative chatter or what if, whatever. I was so alive because I knew that every cell of my body had to be there, because if it wasn't, you know, there was the risk of death. So yes. Again, it's a kind of a forcing, you know, I looked back in that, it's just forcing your way into now. It's a very extreme way of doing it. I don't, you know, but that's really why it's such an exciting high. But like any kind of like extreme way of doing that, you know, I've got a lot of friends and I understand it's still, you know, I was chasing that for a long time, that it's not sustainable because you need to keep pushing it. The more comfortable you get, you need to endlessly be pushing the limit, because as soon as you're comfortable in something and you really feel I've got no risk of falling here, you don't get into the now anymore. Yes. You know, so that's what pushes people to more and more extremes. But certainly the aliveness was the vigilance of I'm not lost in my head here. I'm fully in my body, present. You know, so there's a great power to that. So how it's almost a challenge, like how do I get into that state without having to put myself, you know, on the side of a mountain, you know, one turn away from death? How can I bring that in a more balanced way that's perhaps, you know, more in tune with where I am?
This whole conversation on flow state. Stephen Kotler's written a couple of books on the kind of neurochemistry of flow, and he studied extensively the extreme sports, and there's so much. I must get him on the podcast actually, that he's done so much. He's really gone deep on that, and he has started to look at, well, he's more than started, he's deep into how do we cultivate a state of flow outside of it.
Totally.
You mentioned The Power of Now. I've got it in my eyesight actually. I'm in my line of sight. I can see it on my shelf just there. I read it for the first time when I was 25 and it just washed over my head. I just couldn't grasp it. But then 10 years later, I was listening to the audiobook. It was like a day like today where the sun was shining. And I almost, you know, it sounds out there, but I felt like I could feel the energy of like everything that I was witnessing. You know, it's just totally immersed in that moment and feel this rich aliveness, and the kind of the tapestry of life was like I really tuned into it. And it's just like,
well, it's the same, Dan. We've got such a similar story that you know, my mum gave it to me, I think, when I was in my early 20s. And that classic one, you know, picked it up, you know, couldn't get past page 10, you know, and it was one of those, like, it's a great example of how you can't till you're ready for whatever reason. It's the exact same book, but at some point, maybe for me, it was, you know, it'd been on my bookshelf for 10 years, don't know what the catalyst, but read it, and life-changing.
Yes.
But 10 years before, even though I had the will and I wasn't close to it, I was really curious, whatever, you know, I couldn't get past page 6, 7, didn't speak to me. And then at that point, it was the ultimate book to really what I needed at that time. And I had a very similar experience of, you know, to get into that, wow, this is so critical. It's a critical stepping stone. And that's happened, I look back in my life, so often, which is why partly on this kind of journey, you know that you can't necessarily get others around you that kind of will to get into where you are on the same page. You can plant seeds, you can help, and the people are, but you can't bring somebody to, as people couldn't bring me any quicker than I was going to go. You can actually share and plant the seeds and then be open. But the idea that just with amazing info and it was the same book written by the same person, nothing had changed, but I wasn't there to embody that message at that time. So it's a very similar experience now.
I had the same with the Tao Te Ching, which is the Taoist text. I read that at the same time. Have you read the Tao Te Ching?
I haven't, no.
Yeah, so it's Chinese philosophy, an ancient Chinese philosophy. And again, that when I first read it, it all starts in kind of parables and riddles. But they're just, when you get into the meaning of these different stories and the different interpretations of them, it's so powerful. I read it again about 10 years after, and it was just like, it's not like Buddhism as a kind of, it's an Eastern philosophy for sure. But there's just so much wisdom in there around how to live a good life and how not to get caught up in the kind of that way. It is really largely how to live in alignment with what they call they call it the Tao.
Yes, absolutely.
Being in line with the Tao, which is the now. It's the flow, and there's just so much wisdom in there. And there's I can also see the book. It's called the Tao of Pooh and the Tear.
Oh yes, yeah.
The Piglet. That's using the story of Winnie the Pooh to tell the stories of the Tao. It's kind of a way to bring it into the Western audiences. And I remember reading that. I think it was on the beaches of Sri Lanka or Thailand, and that was just like. And you're in the maybe I was in the right state for it. The sun shining, sitting on the beach, but it's just like these boom, 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 aha, light bulbs.
Totally. And it's interesting because going back to that, that first year lockdown again, I didn't find it easy, even though I had I felt like I had quite a good understanding of what's going on. Of course, it wasn't easy because a lot of, and what was very clear to me, like most people, I was, endlessly planning a lot in advance, and part of my escapism was, and particularly as somebody's passionate skier, I'm going to be back in the Alps, I'm going to be back in the snow, and not being able to plan the kind of future escapes or what you love, and again, actually, that's our kind of escapism from the now and kicking it forward. So again, it brought me into that. This is really visceral. This has brought me right here, and again, I'm not defending banning the travel and trapping us, but there was a gift in it for me.
Yes.
And equally, somebody who left England, never felt really attached to him, being away 20 plus years, 23 years, based in France, based in the Alps, and a bit in Portugal. That I was always resistant to here. I'd never felt home. I grew up in London, felt much more at home in the mountains, but I was forced to, and I'd always ever come here, see my family, but always never been present, always thinking, well, I'm getting out. It doesn't resonate with me. But by being forced to stay here, it opened my eyes, and I'm looking around because I knew I was staying here, and it transformed my experience. Yes. And I was seeing beauty that I wasn't seeing because partly I was kind of always somewhere else. And, so again, the huge gift in it healed, the lockdowns, it healed my relationship with England and appreciating it, whatever. And so
I had the exact same. I genuinely, what you were describing, I went through the exact same process because again, we planned our travels. We want to do these different things. Yeah. We've just been to Thailand. We'd been there for our honeymoon in February. We caught it just in time. We came back 2 weeks after, or a week before lockdowns hit, so we managed to get our honeymoon in. But then we had all these other trips planned, and we had our entire life mapped out for the year, really, to a certain degree. And then obviously lockdowns hit. But I did exactly that. I remember walking out of my house, and it reminded me when my sister went through a breakup in her early 20s, and she was very upset. And I said, try this technique. It's very simple. Whenever you're out and about and you're just like ruminating, your mind is getting sad, just look up at the second layer of the buildings. Just look at like the upper layer, because we just tend to walk around and we don't actually look at. And she did it, and she went out and she said, I feel like I've seen my town with totally new eyes. So
for the first time, you're seeing for the first time. Yeah, that's the transformational.
So for her, it's about changing her focus. But for me, in this experience, I saw that whole new, like all these ornate buildings and these flower pots, and it's just like
and it just shows how powerful the veil is. So all my veil was, I don't really like England, so I wasn't even looking at it. And it wasn't, it wasn't like a hatred, and it just it was a veil of this is not for me. Therefore, I wasn't seeing what was there.
Yes.
There was a veil there, and so taking that veil off, and that's what thing. A lot of this journey is dropping those veils and seeing what's really there.
Yes.
That's the journey on so many levels.
Speaking of veils, have you seen Phil, the documentary called Stutz on Netflix by
No, I haven't.
So Jonah Hill, the actor, he's put together this documentary about Phil Stutz, who's a psychotherapist or a therapist. I think it's a psychotherapist. Really, really, really great. It's about an hour and a half long. It's fantastic. But midway through the broadcast, it looks like they've been sat in his therapy room. But all of a sudden, like, Jonah stops and says, we need to bring a level of realness to this conversation. Turn off the lights, and all of a sudden, like, you realize it's a green screen. Mine. They're not even in his office. And the reason I say that is it feels a bit like, this is just because we've been recording this. It feels like the moment we decided we were going to record this, it's turned into a pilot episode of our podcast.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
It's funny, like, there's like almost a subconscious shift that happens the moment you press record. But and what they did is they started talking about like how they engineered the set in order to kind of portray this, and it turned out because they're recording it over a period of time. Jonah was actually wearing a wig so that he had continuity, because they wanted to make it look like one entire therapy session, but it was done over like a year. So of course he'd been in different parts and in these different shows, different films. So he was wearing a wig. He took it off, and then they revealed the green screen. It's like, I feel like we're in the podcast now.
Yes, yeah.
But we can take ourselves out of it and recognize that actually this is another proof point. This type of certainly I'm feeling inspired and empowered by this conversation, and I feel like there is certainly an audience that will be appreciative of this type of discussion, because where is it happening? I mean, it's out there. People are having these conversations, but I would say explicitly in the context of all the chaos and the carnage that's happened in the world around us the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Who within that container is really? There are people for sure, but I think it's, to me, the importance, if we are to zoom out and say, actually, what kind of format does the show look like? I'd say it's just organic conversations like this. We could pick a theme, or we could external events that
there are always catalysts and triggers to bring in that go up, that's in your journey. But you're absolutely right. People are starving for that level. And I always think, I feel very soothed all through these processes, because I do this regularly, because that's what I know works for me, and that's what keeps me moving. And I always say, people, I give a lot of talks and do that. I need that. It's not. I'm getting the dialogue going for everybody, for myself. So because I know I have that need, and I know it always shifts me, and it shifts the other people I'm speaking with, because we learn off each other, and we bounce off each other, and it's not a situation of, that's why I like to call it more of a dialogue and a bringing together people. Yes, some people have got more info in certain areas, but it's not the kind of setup of the expert, the audience. We're all, I don't want to use that term because I felt like I'm being copied. We're all in it together, So I don't mean, but not in a socially engineered way. We're all in it as individuals, finding our way. We can all learn off each other, and keeping things moving and keep having those. And it's the perspectives. I've always been somebody, and it's interesting because it was a real something I struggled with when I was younger. I had too many perspectives, and I used to think I'm going to give myself my fear side thought. I've got so many thoughts in my head. I'm going to give myself a brain tumor, right? That was my scared child vision of it. How can I stop it? Now it's kind of brought it to balance. I'm really appreciative of that, because what I think I do is look at different angles, perspectives, because they all exist and they're helpful to shift things. None of them have to be right or wrong.
Yes.
But being able to shift that perspective and always be able to zoom out and get curious, and that helps to be on. This is really critical and important, and at the same time, hang on, it's just playing out and allowing it. I'm just curious. And as I said, the real key, Dan, is it's not either or, it's both.
Yes,
both. I had an amazing chat with a guy, Fergus O'Connor, who's written an amazing book called 180 Degrees. He was at conference very much about that. Again, it tiled into these binaries. Everyone's very much and or whatever. It's both and.
Yes.
So often it's both and.
Always, yeah, it's almost every time.
Yeah.
Throughout my entire business career, every time I always come up to what feels like a fork in the road, and it's like our logical mind goes, well, I've got 2 legs, 2 feet. I have to choose. I have to, if I'm going to walk down a path, I have to go down one. But that's when we constrain ourselves to logic, you know.
Yeah. And it's interesting, before I started my talk, guy in the front row, kind of lovely guy, but he kind of almost preempted it before he said, "Can I not just stay with my cash?" As if he was panicking that I was going to give a talk and he then had to go either way. And I absolutely, of course you can, because no one's saying you've got to do this or do that. It's both.
Yeah, you can do both.
You do, and it's very advisable to do both and to do multiple things. But there's a kind of
don't be limited by those 2 choices either.
Exactly. You do endless.
And
I think getting that options open and then exploring those options is why people are resonating to the discussions, because it's not pushing any line of this is the way to go, because it's like maybe you've got some extra info to clarify. Wow, I didn't. For me, what's exciting for people is showing them paths they didn't know existed.
Yeah.
Not saying go down them, but just showing, I don't know, there are these paths, they exist.
Yes.
You then can make your own decision. Is that an interesting path for me to look at? I don't know where that path is either, but just to show the lots more doors and options, and because I think the kind of the mainstream does want to corral you into not having options. You've always got options, and I think this whole narrative, what we're going through, is about shining a light on your own choices, and you have got choices.
Yes.
But it's almost like we, as people who want to maybe make solutions and carve out, I think we have to take more decisions and choices. The kind of trap is basically saying, if you don't want to make decisions or don't want to choose anything, that's the road for you, which is it's all done for you. So it is kind of like there's something for wherever you're at, and that's why I try to hit the judgment. If you don't want to take bread and do choices, then absolutely that's the way you may end up going for now.
Yeah.
But if you want to go on that kind of sovereign path, then it's going to be more decisions and more choices and more challenges. Yes. But I'd argue, more rewards.
Yeah, more choices does come with more challenges. I find that you've got to, from my own lessons, you've got to be willing to make quick decisions sometimes when it's needed. But other times it's about, okay, it's almost like being the artist. Sometimes the artist will take a decade to produce their art. I'm not saying you should take a decade to make every decision, but sometimes there's time for rapid decision making. Other times there's time for you to just be with the information until you get that internal alignment. When there are more choices, it can lead to things like procrastination. It takes you back into paralysis.
Totally. From being in the bar restaurant game for quite a few years, that the idea that people don't want too many choices, can't handle them. So it's the old classic stress. If you give somebody at a restaurant a massive menu, they don't need all that choice. They don't want it. They're stressed.
Yep.
They would, they'd rather be led. And often, I was in my young years a barman, and what I realized often is that people don't know what they want.
Yes.
And they do want somebody they trust and have a good feeling for and resonate. It's not they want to get involved with the trickster, but they do want to be led by somebody who can say, I'll make you something. And often people are soothed by, thank God, I haven't got to make the choice. But that is a challenge on sovereign paths. You do need to make more choice yourself. But I think too much choice absolutely does stress people out.
Yes. And actually one of the sovereign paths is actually about knowing how to constrain your own choices.
Yeah.
Rather than actually necessarily laboring over individual choices. It's like slicing off, if you take that menu approach in a restaurant, it's like, right, I either want this type of dish or that type of dish. At least you're reducing it down straight away to smaller number of options, and being certain in that choice. And then, you still got variability, flexibility, but you're actually constraining because, in the world of design and creativity, constraints are seen as one of the greatest ways to innovate, because you're creating the capacity for radical simplification, which is where some of the greatest things arise from. So but that's the counterbalance of the sovereign way. It's actually knowing how to navigate abundance rather than scarcity.
And I think what soothes me a little bit is do you feel, I suppose it comes back to your intuition, your gut feeling, do you feel better going on your path without kind of feeling like there's a successful failure in it? It's almost like, for me, the success I don't want to use that word, but almost the calling is to go on your own path.
Mm.
The failure is not going on my path.
Yes.
Not to where the path leads me. It's almost like, do I internally know if I've sold out and I'm not rising to the challenge? Now, it's almost like rise to the challenge is the win or lose. It's not a success of how did that end up? Does that make sense? It's kind of like, actually the victory, if there is one, is answering the call to go on that journey. And I think all of us has different qualities to it. There is no way to quantify that. But almost like, for me, the only failure and I would know about, doesn't mean anybody else would know. It's not even tangible to somebody outside of you. You almost know when you've ignored the call to do the right thing, or to go on the path. That's the failure of almost going, I'm going to avoid that and try and be comfortable. And it's almost like the beauty of it built in is, it's almost like, that wish for comfort, whatever, when you've chosen to try and go back to sleep in a certain area and avoid it, so you can do it, but you haven't really done, I don't want to use those words, it's hard to use the words, but the right thing, or the higher path,
Yeah. And
so
your path as well, because, it's that piece around leadership. There's the old adage that people need to be great followers before they become great leaders. And as a result, they'll look to others for guidance and information and wisdom. And I certainly relate to that. That's how my journey is. And I still in some areas I'm a follower, in other areas I see myself as a leader, because I'm learning, I'm growing. And actually the difference now is I would follow, someone else's methods or strategies in business, say, for example, which would lead to certain marketing tactics or strategies, and then have mixed results. And sometimes it'd feel like I was pushing a rock up a mountain. And those times it was because it wasn't true to my unique wiring. And so actually, in many ways, it's the hero's journey, that story of struggle, that initial catalyst, and then meeting the mentor that helps you on a path of transformation. But that path of transformation is usually because you're finding greater alignment within. The mentor actually helps you find the wisdom within oneself.
Totally, which comes back to you. Yeah.
And you start to follow your path then, rather than walking someone else's path.
Yeah.
That, to me, is the sovereign way.
Yeah.
You can be guided by others, but look for my experience in the last 5 years in particular is about finding mentors and those who are guides who bring me back to myself rather than to themselves.
Absolutely. That's the critical change, and almost in what you said there, Dan, because people are often stressed by this idea of, all the controlled opposition, the agents, which all exist, but actually doing that mitigates it all, because it's almost like the only so I've said similar to you, I would follow people's work and info, but I've never put them on a hero pedestal, which I would have done before, because I am the only hero in my journey, as you are, as everybody is. So what rather than having to work out proof, are they an agent, are they a shill, are they a gatekeeper, you don't have to. You just have to stay true on your path, which is the only way they get you in trouble is if you keep following them against your own intuition. So somebody could, and that's how they work. Gatekeepers give 80% truth because they want to lead you into 20% of agenda or nonsense, or corral you away from something. So the point is, they might have done amazing stuff for you and been a huge part of your awakening process and taught you all that stuff. But when they veer off something that you don't think right, don't follow, because they're not a hero. You're ready to pivot and be agile. So the adage is always going to be no more heroes, because it's coming back to you, means it's absolutely, you're not giving your power away. Because then, even, I think that's the thing of gurus, even genuine gurus they're all humans, therefore they can all self-corrupt, be corrupted. That's always the argument, like we said, it's not full corruption from the system, it can be self-corruption.
Indeed.
So, I like the idea, like some stories about the gurus in India who may have started out with really pure intentions, and particularly the kind of sexual aspect where they suddenly had all those Western women giving all the sexual energy, even though they were really, clued up about their stuff, they'd never experienced that, and they felt a temptation of, having sex with a lot of their, female followers. They slipped into that. So I think it was very freeing for me to not put anybody in a pedestal ever, and to take what you hear and be ready to pivot and know that everybody's fallible. We're all human. And that was really, rather than being disappointing, that was really freeing, because actually that was my first step to thinking back to me being the hero in my own journey.
Yes, that's so important. I remember I mentioned the Unstoppable podcast. One of my first guests was Rob Moore, of the Disruptive Entrepreneur. We've become good friends since. But one of the first things he said was, if you put other people on a pedestal, you put yourself in a pit. You know, you're putting others above yourself. And you know, you can understand the rationality for that. You know, someone has become a master because they've studied their craft, you know, relentlessly for a period of time. But you can still you can look into them rather than up to them. You know, you can look into their gift, their greatness, their mastery, and still, you know, learn something and also use it as a reflection into oneself. But is the moment you put yourself into a secondary position, you know, you're relegating your own worth, your own power. And the other pieces as well for this is, it leans back into what we've said. We increasingly live into this kind of like very identity politics type of world, which means that if the person you are following online agree, there's like 4 or 5 things you fundamentally agree upon, but the moment they say something that's counter to that 4 or 5 things, or they go in a different direction in another area, it's like people were so willing to drop that person because it's like, good luck finding someone who sees the world entirely the same as you. And it goes back to what you said about these, like the world would be boring if we had no challenges. Similarly, if we all felt and saw the world identically, that to me is like the ultimate dystopia. You know,
absolutely. Which you could argue that, you know, that's partly, you know, the New World Order sort of spiritual version is their principle, which is even a peaceful, get rid of all dark people and we're all, you know, homogenized in this kind of calm peace. So that's almost like, that's what I love about saying I want to support everybody in their own unique way, as they would support me on my sort of journey, as long as we're not doing any, you know, the kind of common, you know, natural law, do no harm, not but on that level, everyone's path is completely unique, which is why I don't need consensus and I'm not looking for it, because that would be boring, and B, we are all different, but can we be, can we support each other in our uniqueness? And again, that's what's really interesting. It's the agendas are so clever at talking about this kind of, you know, this woke agenda about equality, but actually it's not. It's about homogeny and saying that, you know, because we are different, and let's embrace those differences. You know, it's almost like they want everybody on a low level of equality. You know, not really to shine, you know, as your individuals and your differences, and to be vibrant, and almost that they're very clever at selling it as equality and, you know, egalitarianism, whatever. But actually, it's about stopping people being shining, you know, in their really strong ways, or their tribes, their families, and their differences. And that's what I really support. Is I want everybody, be empowered in your way. You know.
I'm really feeling that in terms of that kind of that vibe that's out there at the minute. It's like it's almost like there's a desire that we'd be equally scarce rather than uniquely abundant. You know, that's, you know, recognizing that each person's abundance in terms of their own inner character, their own unique skill set, their own unique drives, their own unique motivation is going to be different. You know, I mean, there's a whole conversation to be had around what does equality mean. I mean, that's on my list of subjects to explore on the podcast, because it's just so vast. And what is it? All of these things are very much front and center of this kind of trajectory. It's one of those things that sounds, you know, that there's things that always sound favorable, but it's the reasonable intent, but it's the questionable means that come with it. That's where it gets tricky.
And that veil, I said, if you still got a veil where you don't understand how there are nefarious agendas, and there are the same. I always give the example of the WEF manifesto, the World Economic Forum, right? You could, you know, from my point of view, I can see that's got it's about control and it's not about great good. If you're unaware there's a nefarious view in the world, then you can read exactly the same document and go, that sounds great. You know, so it's the filter, or it's your awareness, or it's almost your aperture of how much you can see and what angle you're seeing it from, that can lead you to have a completely different conclusion to the exact same piece of info. So, you know, so it's really, you know, what broader view can you can look at it with, and that will shift how you view certain things. So that's why it's very hard to, you know, that's why a lot of the agendas, like I talk about stakeholder capital, Dan, that's the shift we're going towards. Now, stakeholder capital, in essence, is a very, you know, interesting idea, because it's about moving away from the evil corporations, you know, who are just doing the bottom line for shareholders, to a more considerate way that includes everybody. And that, but of course, as we've discussed, they, unfortunately, that's top down saying what the greater good of stakeholders. What is the, so i.e. the stakeholders being, the whole ecosystem, everybody in it, and companies have got to, respect that, which is great, and it's needed in terms of pollution, in terms of corruption, in terms of everything. But of course, it's decided from quite a small pool of people, and it's not really about, what most people think. So it's very clever, and it's very hard to convince people that there's an agenda about that, because actually, coming from a certain angle, it's there are really good things. It's like we talk about this. There's managed to really core issues that seem good, but actually can be quite usurped and perverted, and actually they're not really what they want. But it's hard to grasp that, really.
Yes. But the other thing is, even if you're not assessing the intent, which is often, there's been a lot of talk around intent of various things that have happened in the last couple of years, whether it's, benign, or whether it's, benevolent or malevolent, it's whether it's evil, whether it's good or bad. These things are very difficult to actually pinpoint. When people ask, is this coordinated, is this happening, without concrete evidence, it's challenging at times to tell. But that said, history shows that these things happen over and over again. But even if you're not looking at the intent level and you're only looking at the means, people just aren't thinking about more than the first step. So, for instance, I'm talking at a protest in Oxford on Saturday for the 15-minute sit against the 15-minute cities. You can put out. I mean, even the episode graphic we've got for this episode is like this utopian, lovely bright beach setting, but then we put like barbed wire over it, because you make it sound like, oh, brilliant. Because in theory, if I could get everything I needed within 15.
It's almost. That's why it's so clever. I'm glad you brought that up. It's a great example of it, because actually, it's you could say, well, it's about sporting local. It's about shopping local and doing everything local. So it's absolutely really a clever fine line.
And the reality is, where I live right now, I actually have found myself accidentally in that position where I've got, like, if I walk a mile that way, I'm at the beach. If I get in the car 15 minutes that way, I'm in the New Forest. If I go 15 minutes that way, I'm at this beautiful high street that's got amazing independent restaurants, cafes, bars, all kinds of local shops. It's amazing. But the reality is, like, they're not talking about making the perimeter your 15-minute. They're not talking about investing in your local area to make it wonderful and brilliant, so that you don't have to travel. If they did that, if it's like, we've got all this resources, we're going to make your whole area superb, we're going to make these new parks, it's going to be beautiful. But no, it's not about that. It's about how it's about taking away the choice.
Exactly. So it's taking away the choice. Exactly. If you've got the choice and that's where you're called to go on your journey, it's imposing from top down, saying this is the way, get with it, and this is good, and that's the real issue. It's a brilliant example of it. Brilliant.
Right, Sam. So how often do we want to have these conversations, publicly on the podcast?
How often do we need it for ourselves?
I need these type of chats weekly. It's just I need that top up. That it's I have my daily practices. So this morning I'm up early. I'm up usually between 6:30. When we move closer towards spring, I get a bit earlier. But I do my qigong, I do my meditation, I do my journaling, and then I have my power hour with Zach. As Zach's getting older, this is amazing. Like, he loves music. So we have, like, we put on this music and we're in the kitchen, like, rocking out together, just dancing. It's brought a new level of high vibe in the morning.
Totally.
Because I love to get in, like, a really, like, blissful state before I start my day, because I know the moment I log in and, like, Twitter comes on, I go on to, like, because I've set up all my news feeds through Feedly, so I get, like, this one page, like, it's really convenient, so I can get everything from all the resources that I trust. But it means I'm instantly into, like, the chaos of the world.
Totally. And what's the beauty, why people are attracted to children in that level of their energy, like the engagement, because they're present.
Yes.
Absolutely. What you connecting with them, he's in the present moment much more. As we grow older, we fall out of that. So that's why, people often find that calm just hanging out with which I've got my nieces over at the moment. Like, it's brilliant, because you're much more in that, present moment, playful space.
He's dancing there. It's amazing seeing him grow up, because, like, he didn't really, it's part of his evolution. He's just evolving to the point where he now understands music and he understands movement, and he's experiencing his own physical body and his own boundaries. And it's like he's already broken more physical boundaries than I had at that age, because I was very stifled. That's partly probably why I'm now doing the things I'm doing. But I got onto that on the basis that, you know, I need to have that daily habit, those daily habits to get me centered, to get a positive state of mind, because, you know, and I do I'm starting to do my cold showers again, because that was a big thing for me, because the health benefits, but also just doing something where your brain goes, I really don't want to do that. I really don't want to get really cold right now. So I'm just like, slam, like, shut up. Silence the fear for a bit, because then anytime I face things in the day where it's just like, I don't want to do that, I've got to be able to switch that part of my brain off, because, you know, sometimes it's okay, like, this is, if you constantly do that, you're not doing it in presence, and you're just relentlessly doing things that you don't enjoy, that's a whole different story. But you know, there are practicalities in getting things done that require you to be able to go through that resistance that's coming up within you. So I do that. So I need those kind of daily practices to kind of keep me productive, keep me focused, keep me in a high vibe, keep me energized, but also keep me sane amongst all of the carnage.
So, totally, because that's critical, because the carnage is not going to stop.
Yeah,
and that's why I'd be real about it. You know, the hope or the wish, you know, the carnage going to stop. You know, the tricksters aren't going to stop being tricksters. You know, the manipulation not going to stop. But so, you know, where can we start? We start with getting ourselves strong.
Yes.
You know, and I say, I don't mean in a fear way, but I'm on a war footing.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a warrior. This is, you know, it's this time to be in a warrior war footing, which is like ready. And therefore, yeah, absolutely, I'm not under illusion that things aren't going to come from all angles. But if you're in that setting where you know that's reality, rather than thinking, oh shit, they come, then yes, it's not a surprise, but you're ready to take reaction and react, you know, in present time. And it's the constantly fear of, I hope it doesn't, you know, then you can allow it to play out and you're ready to react, because you're in. So yeah, getting yourself in a strong place is everything.
Yes. You know? Yes. So I have that on a daily basis, but that's why I think, you know, these types of conversations, it's almost, you know, I probably I read a lot of stuff, obviously, for my work, but I'm always listening to stuff if I'm driving somewhere, if I'm walking, and increasingly now I use my listening time, my podcast time, for really inspirational, forward focused, solution orientated. Whereas before, I was using, in the last couple of years, I was using it as to further my education around what was going on. Whereas now there's just such an abundance of materials in the written form, which I can speed read, I can get what I need. Whereas now I try and, like, because there's also the psychological element when you're listening to something or watching something, you're priming your inner senses. So I think that's why it's so important to tap into something positive, something forward focused.
Totally, and particularly the people who, which is a huge swathe of them, have, you know, been on this awakening process about the agendas, whatever, in this last 3 years. They are saturated. You know, understandably so. You know, and I meet them I chat to some people this week at the conference. You know, I take my hat off. You know, I've been digesting all this stuff over 15, 20 years, and it was full on. A lot of these people have been digesting that, you know, from a you know, standing start in 2020 to now. You know, it blows my mind. You know, and hats off to them. You know, and I'm always like, wow, I'm you know, fair play. You know, I had you know, I was in and out in a way I could, because I, you know, awareness, get scared, go back asleep. You know, almost choose to. I'm going back. You know, and particularly there weren't many people around to talk to. It's more on, you know. So I had my dance of, you know, 20 years of in and out, but these people have done like 3 years of that level of info and that level of having to rethink things and having the rug pulled on their beliefs, ideas. So understandably, people are slightly burnt out, is what I'm seeing, and saturated, and that you can endlessly keep going with the news, but having more of this kind of coming back to ourselves. You know, which is where the power is. People know that, and I think what I'm seeing now is a lot more people are ready and realizing that you know, they're not going to get a win or lose from the agendas in the, you know, it's going to be ongoing. So the only answer is to come back inside. What am I going to do? Regardless of what's happening out there, what am I going to do? That's where the power is. You know, it doesn't mean you know, I support all the activism, I support challenging. So it's not either or, is it? It's not, I'm not going to do anything, I'm just going to do me. But getting that in balance, which is absolutely, if you're called to activist, brilliant, that's great. And we need to challenge the councils and locally, but equally, the core is coming back to you. And that's where I think a lot of people are ready to and hungry to. And that's where the real tangible moving forward is, you know?
Yes. Yeah, I agree.
So I think it's really valuable.
Every week, how's your schedule? Every 2 weeks? What do you reckon?
I think every 2 weeks is a minimum. Yeah, I think that'd be the minimum. I'm open to a once a week. It just, what do you think the appetite will be?
We'll have to see. My low battery warning has just come on. I think it's just about building some momentum and some consistency. I find with the podcast, it's always about consistency. So, whether it's daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, like it doesn't matter. It's just about creating a repeatable pattern that people understand and know when things are coming. And
I think there's always for ourselves and for the audience, keeping the continuity is what they're lacking.
Yeah.
Like I can relate to the financial stuff and the crypto stuff. People in that space are generally getting empowered and seeing stuff, but they fall out of it.
Yeah.
Even with the best ones, they fall out of it. They got so many other things. So I think that continuity of those sessions would be helpful for people.
Yeah.
Because really, almost we're just bringing a bit of real chat sanity to the situation, and it's an outlet for people, and for, as it is for us, it's an outlet to just look at the perspectives and because I think I love that word of navigating. We're all navigating together. Let's have a discussion about navigating this craziness and this. And I think being on a warfare, I'm prepared that it's going to get crazier.
Yes.
And why I'm not in a panic is because I have people like yourself, Dan, people I know locally, because we have this conversation regularly. Therefore, in a sense, that's really rich. If it's bringing up really interesting conversations, that is life. So I always talked about people in this last 2 years, even almost trying to get to life beyond this. This is life. Yes. Don't forget that this is it.
Right now. Yeah.
It's almost like whatever happens, this is life, and it's this is it. This is rich and challenging and scary and all. But this is it. There's nowhere to get to. And again, it comes back to your point of it's almost like the kicking down the road, thinking I get to a utopia that exists. Well, you aren't going to, and equally that would be boring. This is it.
Yeah. We're looking back to, I wish it was just how it was in 2019. It's like all those problems.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I wish I didn't know as many people. I can have great chats with them. And,
exactly.
Yeah, and so it's only fear that stops people moving forward. And again, it came up in my chat at the conference weekend where, a lot of that, I just want to stay. I'm scared of the future system. I'm scared of crypto. I'm scared of digital. I'm scared of all that. Like we discussed, I want to stay with my original slave tokens. I understand. I know this. I want to stay with the old slavery, and that's how they get people. It is the fear of change.
Yes.
You can embrace change and go, well, we're going to change in a better way. So, that thing of harking back to it was all good it's not true. No, anybody say that? We've all done it, but it's like it's a I want to go to a place where I haven't got to look at myself so much, because that's really what this is forcing people to do.
Yeah,
which is why it's over. Which is why I understand that the obsession with what's going on out there and what they are doing or what the agendas are is totally interesting, and I study it as well, and I'm fascinated. But it can be a distraction from what I've got to do.
Yes,
and that's why people, they know that people will be addicted by that, which is why they don't hide it. I always think the show will always go on because they need people in the theatre watching it.
Yes.
And whether it's cheering for the heroes or the good, even genuine ones,
yes,
as long as you're in that theatre, the show continues.
Yes.
The show only stops when everyone's walked out of the theatre and got on with their own show, and that you can't control.
Yes.
So the theatre, again, I always think that the powers that be or whatever are clever. They want to harness your energy, whatever side of the fence you're on, whatever camp you're in. They want your energy, on the screen reality. Because the one thing you can't control is people getting on, growing some food in their garden, having an alternative economy. You can't control that, and people, they're aware that they rely on you being corralled by the screen, by the fear. You cannot control people just getting on with stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we put this out as a pilot conversation?
Yeah.
And we ask people to put in the comments, would you welcome this type of conversation on a weekly basis or every other week? Just let us know in the comments, because then we can use that as a guide. Obviously, we need to look at the practical kind of elements for you and I be able to be available at the same time consistently and that sort of stuff. But I certainly need these types of conversations on a weekly basis. And of course, we're going to talk about how we're going to continue that conversation as an extension of what we've done with the Navigating Digital Assets course as a monthly group. So I need to go and get my Mac charger. So if we can take a pause here.
Yep.
we'll wrap up our accidental pilot episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Accidental podcast volume 1 wrapped.
Yeah, exactly. Accidental conversations. We should think about a title for that.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for tuning in to this accidental podcast, our pilot episode of our weekly segment where we're going to be navigating the financial reset with my co-host Sam X, who is the creator of the Navigating Digital Assets course within the Elevate platform. If, like me, you're concerned about the nature of the world that we find ourselves in right now and are worried about the financial reset, then conversations like this are going to be essential. So we're actually putting together a monthly support group specifically to navigate the financial reset. We're finalizing the details as we speak. So in addition to the weekly conversations that we'll be having here on the podcast, as an extension of the work that we created within the first course that we launched, we'll be creating a group program to help you understand every facet of the financial reset as it emerges. You'll realize, like ourselves, is that this has never happened before, certainly in this way. So we hope to be at the cutting edge of everything as it unfolds, bringing you conversations that help to make sense of the changing world around us, but also highlighting the opportunities that are becoming available. This is ultimately about helping people to find their own sovereignty, their own personal power, and take full control of your financial destiny. So if that sounds like something you'd like to be involved with, you can scan the QR code on the screen if you're watching, or simply go to weareelevate.org/financial reset. That's weareelevate.org/financial reset, and you get the details of what's coming up. So watch this space, look out for more conversations like this one. Please let us know your feedback in the comments. Did you enjoy this conversation? What would you like to hear more about? Today, we were really focusing on the inner game, but we'll obviously be exploring a whole range of subjects as we get together each and every week. Thanks again for tuning in. My name is Astin-Gregory. This is the Elevate Podcast.